I mean, who on earth gets up and then does this with their nose? Only Olivia Colman would do that. Hi, I'm Viv Grosskop. I'm a writer, comedian, and I am the creator of How to Own the Room, Women and the Art of Brilliant Speaking. And I'm here at Penguin to break down some famous speeches by women.
What's your message to world leaders today?
My message is that we'll be watching you.
So really interesting start for Greta there. She appeared out of nowhere and has become one of the best, most loved public speakers, I think, of the last 5 years. And who would have believed that someone of her age, not a native English speaker, someone with Asperger's syndrome, would cut through on the level that she has. It's pretty extraordinary. Very interesting moment there, though, where she adjusts that microphone and pulls it closer to herself. A microphone like that, and everybody needs to know this, don't touch it. There'll be somebody who will be adjusting the volume of that microphone, and you don't have to do it yourself. In that moment, she shows her humanity, she shows her age, she shows that, you know, she's just a young girl who's really interested in the environment. She's not some polished politician who's got every soundbite at the tip of their fingertips. That's actually really great example of why sometimes it's important to be okay with making a mistake.
I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope.
This is a really interesting one because for me, she's got too much anger and emotion in the beginning of this. She takes more control of it later on. This is clearly a moment that has a lot of emotional resonance for her, and it's very, very finely balanced as to whether she's bringing us into that and making us think, wow, this is really important to her, we should listen, or pushing us away just a little bit because we're thinking, oh wow, why is she getting so emotional about this so early in the speech?
You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones.
This is a very difficult speech for her to give, and the emotion is coming very, very fast, and she's got tears in her eyes. She is clearly expressing something bigger than I think she even meant to express with this speech. She's talking on two different levels. One level is stop killing the planet, you're going to ruin everything for all children. But the second is, I feel there's a subtext here, there's a subtext in every speech, and I feel as if the subtext is that she's actually had her childhood stolen from her by having to become an advocate for this movement. You know, she doesn't want to have to do this, but she now has to because her voice has become so powerful. But she's almost saying that she doesn't entirely want to do this and that she's speaking with some level of reluctance, which I think, again, I think it's pretty powerful, actually.
For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear.
This is where I think it starts to become more powerful as a speech. Earlier on in the speech, when she's very angry and emotional, we feel the level of her engagement and her emotion, and that's really powerful and useful. But sometimes that level of emotion can get in the way of us understanding exactly what she just said. Whereas now, she's calmed down a bit and her message is coming out a lot clearer, and she's taking everything thought by thought and putting a pause in at the end of every thought.
Sucking hundreds of billions of tons of your CO2 out of the air with technologies that barely exist.
She's also set up a really interesting dichotomy between her world and the people she's talking to. She's representing, this is what I want and what you're doing is wrong. But she's actually speaking to a third group of people who are the people who are going to be on her side. So she's setting up this interesting kind of me versus the world, and as in the world being people who are polluting everything. But the people she's actually speaking to is another group of people who are the rest of us who are going to be sympathetic towards her argument. And that's something very interesting, that she's able to let herself go into that anger towards this other group in order to show the rest of us of like, look what I've been brought to, that this has made me this angry.
The world is waking up, and change is coming whether you like it or not. Thank you.
Very good ending as well. You could say change is coming whether you like it or not is a perfectly good ending, but she has done enough speaking to know that she really needs to signal the end. So she says, thank you. And that sounds like a really simple thing, but we've all been at events where somebody's finished speaking and nobody's quite sure whether they've finished speaking or not. So having that technique of always making sure that you've done a really good ending, don't forget to say thank you. This is one of my favourite speeches of all time, Michelle Obama at the Democratic Convention. This is a speech that she worked on for 10 weeks beforehand with her speechwriter, Sarah Hurwitz. And I love how she is in those opening moments with that open posture, taking in the response of the audience, allowing herself to enjoy their response to her and their love of her, but completely without ego, in a very open and generous way. I do an exercise when I do workshops with women who are trying to improve their confidence and get really good at speaking. And it's when everybody in the room applauds you for an uncomfortably long time. And it's so interesting to see what happens to people in that moment. And it's exactly that response of love and approval that Michelle Obama is trying to decide what to do with there. She can't quite decide whether to push it away and quieten people down or to lean into it. A lot of us think that we fear criticism and rejection, and yeah, those things are scary. But actually the thing we can sometimes find really hard to take in is praise and approval. So learning to take those things in and being relaxed about it in that open, magnanimous way that she's showing there is really, really beautiful. I love that so much.
I also told you about our daughters, how they are the heart of our hearts, the center of our world. And during our time in the White House, we've had the joy of watching them grow from bubbly little girls into poised young women.
So this is really interesting how she flows into this speech. So you know some people speak like this and it's just really irritating and they're overusing their hands. With her, she'll punctuate what she has to say with these very slow, sometimes sharp movements, very, very delicately spaced out so she's not overusing them. And it's really as a courtesy to the audience that she does this, to try and direct their attention and really show this is the part of the sentence I want you to focus on. This is the thing I really want to say. This is a connection I really want us to have. It's also great for showcasing her amazing upper arms.
I will never forget that winter morning as I watched our girls, just 7 and 10 years old, pile into those black SUVs with all those big men with guns.
It's a masterclass in how to pace a speech. She's talking about something that's quite informal, that's quite chatty. She's talking about what it was like to arrive at the White House and have 2 daughters under the glare of the international spotlight and taking us into her world. She gives you the time by pacing the sentences and taking a very short but noticeable pause at the end of every sentence so that nothing is ponderous. She's not saying it, oh, this is a really big deal, let me make it really dramatic, this is what it was like for my daughters. She's talking in a very relaxed and gentle way, but she paces it so that she really lets you take it in and lets you form that picture in your own mind. It's incredibly powerful.
That the hateful language they hear from public figures on TV does not represent the true spirit of this country.
Moving from the personal to the political, from the individual to the universal.
No, our motto is, when they go low, we go high.
So obviously that phrase, when they go low, we go high, it's become one of the most important quotes, I would say, of the last 100 years of public speaking. An extraordinary message that has resonated across the world, way beyond this moment, way beyond this election, way beyond the Obamas. And the way that she builds to that, from starting with this first picture of here's a little insight, a window onto my world of what it was like to arrive at the White House. Now I'm moving it into this more global, universal direction of politics and what kind of people do we really want to be? And then she hits it hard with that quote and just lets it settle and lets the crowd register it. If you remember, we know this speech, lots of people know this speech really well now, we know that quote really well. But when she said that, nobody had heard it in public before. And it takes a while for the audience to register it, and then they do, and she needs to give room for them to respond.
to knock on every door.
And this is very interesting. There's such an interesting cadence to this, where she started in this intimate zone, then she's moved into the politics, she's hit with this big quote. Now she's really rising and she's building and she's trying to bring the crowd with her. This is a really hard thing to do unless you're a very accomplished speaker, is to really listen. What are the crowd listening to? What are they responding to? Where can I push harder? Where can I pull back? She's giving them a little bit of space to give those responses, and she's using it to energize herself. But she's also keeping it really in control, because obviously this is going to be a televised moment. This is going to be a video. It goes on to become one of the biggest viral speeches of all time. And she knows she can't overly play the crowd in the moment, but at the same time she's trying to get a lot of energy off of them. Yeah, she knows that she nailed it.
Since last Sunday's dreadful news, we have seen throughout Britain and around the world an overwhelming expression of sadness at Diana's death.
This is almost an impossible speech to give. You absolutely have to respect her. She knows how to read tone. She knows how to hold herself in this very, very contained and neutral zone. And interesting use here, as you'll always see in an address like this from the Queen, of a teleprompter. This is a press release which is being released orally. She has to be seen to read this press release, but she has to be really careful that she doesn't betray any of the subtext of how she really feels about this. So she's not necessarily going to show any weakness, any vulnerability. She's showing a very contained form of strength.
As your Queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart.
You see how difficult it is for her to say as a grandmother. There's a little tiny catch in her voice there.
She was an exceptional and gifted human being.
Yeah, for the Queen, this is super, super emotional. I know it seems ridiculous saying it because her emotions are so contained, but you can hear the slight catch in her voice and you can see the slight movement in her eyes. And that is what makes this rather beautiful, actually.
Nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness. I admired and respected her for her energy and commitment to others.
I have a lot of respect for her for getting through this speech, because it's really, really difficult. She's talking about an extremely emotional and tragic moment that affects the people she loves the most. And she's having to do it, as she says, as your Queen and also as a grandmother. But I really feel as if what she cares about the most is doing it as the Queen.
It is a chance to show to the whole world the British nation united in grief and respect.
So that's what she's been building up to, is this is what it looks like to be united in grief and respect. So there's an interesting marriage of the level of the text, which is quite dry, some of it, and respectful, beautifully written, beautifully expressed, but never emotional or vulnerable. And the expression on her face, which is, I'm not going to crack, this is all fine, I'm going to maintain authority. Beautifully done, but really a very interesting masterclass in control. Oh, Olivia Colman, just look at her. She is being careful she's not going to trip up on her dress. I love it when they do these awards speeches and the person comes up on stage and they give a very natural reaction to other people they can suddenly see in the audience, and she doesn't hold back from doing that at all. Ooh. Look, I mean, who on earth gets up to receive a major acting award and then does this with their nose? Only Olivia Colman would do that. We've all seen these kind of acceptance speeches with actors, and you know, when Kate Winslet says "gather, gather," and you know, Gwyneth Paltrow in Floods of Tears when she won her Oscar for Shakespeare in Love. So we're used to seeing lots of different kinds of reactions, but when Olivia Colman gave this reaction, it was something really, really unusual, because she was just completely undone, but in a very kind of relaxed and amused and very British way. See how she fiddles with her ring.
To be in this category with these extraordinary
She's trying to calm herself.
Glenn Close, you've been my idol for so long, and this is not how I wanted it to be. And
She's just going into full stream of consciousness now. And I love this as an example of this thing that we all fear of, I'll get up there and I'll babble, or I'll say something, or I'll notice somebody, or I'll realise, oh my God, Glenn Close is in the audience, and we all dread giving that speech because we think it would be wrong. And here she is giving it, and it couldn't be more right. It's a fantastic example of how much we love to see somebody being themselves. She couldn't be more herself in this moment. I don't even think anybody could act this. It's just so real.
Oh, thank you so much, Lady Gaga.
It's just so random and so lovely, and I really wish that more stars would do this when they give these speeches, is to express what it's like to be a human being when you get up on stage and just surrounded by all of these celebrities and suddenly Lady Gaga is in the front row. Why would you not say that? Of course you would say that. Brilliant masterclass in being yourself and not worrying about being over-prepared. Sometimes to be under-prepared can be the best thing that you can do. One really interesting thing about all these different female speeches is just how different they are. When I first started performing stand-up comedy, I was always analysing other people and how they perform and what makes them special. And I realised that it needs to come from you. It needs to come from each of us as individuals, and it doesn't look the same in every single person. To be a good speaker, to be a good performer, it's not just one thing. It's about bringing out your individuality and being the kind of speaker that only you can be, and that's exactly what these women do.